A new AI company backed by Donald Trump and Elon Musk is reportedly targeting environmental enforcement agencies with legal challenges. This development has sparked alarm among activists and scientists who fear it could mark the beginning of a major shift in how environmental protections are enforced in the United States. By the end of this video, you'll understand how political and corporate forces are working to weaken environmental regulations and what it could mean for your community. With Trump's history of rolling back environmental policies and Musk's influence on tech and policy discussions, this partnership raises serious concerns about the future of environmental protection. As details emerge, it becomes clear that the company is leveraging its resources to challenge regulations related to emissions, land use, and water management, key areas where environmental enforcement agencies have historically played a critical role. For example, in recent months, legal actions have been filed against EPA guidelines on industrial pollution limits, with the company arguing that these rules are outdated and overly restrictive. This has led to questions about whether such challenges could set dangerous precedents, allowing industries to bypass regulations under the guise of legal review. Environmental activists warn that this is not an isolated incident, but part of a broader trend where corporate interests seek to influence policy through legal means. Similar strategies have been used in the past by fossil fuel companies and other industries to delay or weaken environmental protections. For instance, in some cases, legal battles over pipeline projects have stalled construction for years, sometimes leading to significant ecological damage during that time. The involvement of high-profile figures like Trump and Musk adds another layer of complexity. Trump has long been known for his skepticism toward climate change and his administration's efforts to dismantle environmental regulations. Meanwhile, Musk has publicly expressed interest in renewable energy and sustainable technology, but his business ventures, such as Tesla and SpaceX, also rely on industries that have historically opposed strict environmental standards. This situation raises concerns not only about the future of environmental enforcement, but also about the transparency and independence of legal processes. Critics argue that when powerful individuals or corporations use their influence to challenge regulatory bodies, it can undermine public trust in institutions designed to protect the environment. Moreover, these legal challenges often come with substantial financial resources, giving them a significant advantage over smaller organizations or grassroots movements trying to defend environmental protections. The potential consequences of this trend are far-reaching. If successful, such legal strategies could lead to weakened regulations on pollution, reduced oversight of industrial activities, and fewer protections for vulnerable ecosystems. This could have serious implications for public health, especially in communities already disproportionately affected by environmental hazards. In addition, the long-term impact on climate change mitigation efforts could be significant, as weaker regulations may slow down the transition to cleaner energy sources. As this story unfolds, it is crucial for the public to stay informed and engaged. Environmental issues are not just about policy or legal battles. They affect every person's quality of life, from the air we breathe to the water we drink. The role of citizens in holding corporations and governments accountable has never been more important. Whether through advocacy, voting, or supporting environmental organizations, individuals have the power to shape the future of environmental protection. In conclusion, the emergence of this AI company as a key player in legal challenges against environmental enforcement agencies signals a new phase in the ongoing struggle between corporate interests and environmental protections. The outcome of these battles will likely determine how effectively the United States can address pressing environmental issues in the years to come. Federal agencies like the EPA and the U.S. Department of the Interior are essential for environmental protection. They monitor pollution, enforce clean air and water standards, and preserve natural resources. However, their work is often met with resistance from political figures and corporations. Historically, industries like fossil fuel companies and mining operations have opposed regulations that limit their activities. This resistance includes legislative changes and legal challenges that weaken enforcement efforts. Fossil fuel companies are involved in environmental conflicts, as seen in a 2020 study that mapped over 274,430 environmental conflicts globally, with fossil fuels being one of the major sources. Environmental defenders often clash with powerful industries. Activists defending indigenous rights or sustainable land use have been criminalized in some cases, like in Brazil, where activists against illegal deforestation face violence or imprisonment. Environmental conflicts vary by income level. In low-income countries, issues include land conservation and resource extraction, driven by local communities resisting exploitation. In wealthier nations, conflicts often involve waste management, nuclear energy, and industrial zones, where economic interests override ecological concerns. Deep ecology, introduced in 1972 by Arnon S., challenges anthropocentrism by emphasizing the intrinsic value of all life. This philosophy has influenced activists who view environmental protection as a moral duty beyond economic benefit. If you want to learn more about how these dynamics affect our planet, subscribe for deeper insights. What happens when a company pushes back against powerful federal agencies? How do legal battles shape our rules? The next part of this story might surprise you. Legal challenges have become a powerful tool for corporations and political figures to weaken or eliminate environmental regulations. These lawsuits often argue that certain rules are unconstitutional or harmful to the economy, despite strong scientific support for their necessity. Recently, an AI company linked to Donald Trump and Elon Musk has been involved in legal actions targeting environmental enforcement agencies. This strategy is part of a larger pattern where powerful interests use courts to delay or roll back regulations. Experts say this approach creates uncertainty, making it harder for agencies to enforce rules consistently. A legal analyst noted that these challenges often rely on complex arguments about federal authority and economic impact, even when environmental experts agree the regulations are needed. The goal isn't always to win every case, one lawyer explained. It's to slow things down, make enforcement more difficult, and create doubt in the public mind. What does this mean for everyday Americans and their environment? Looking at past examples, it's clear how these strategies have shaped environmental policy. These include cases where local communities fought against mining, oil drilling, or deforestation projects that threatened their livelihoods and ecosystems. In many instances, legal challenges aim to set precedents for future regulations. For example, in Brazil, indigenous groups have faced repeated legal battles to protect ancestral lands from illegal logging and mining. Another key aspect is the growing trend of criminalizing environmental defenders. In countries with weak governance, activists often face imprisonment or violence. For example, in Indonesia, land rights advocates were arrested on charges of illegal logging after protesting a palm oil company's expansion into protected rainforest areas. The rise of deep ecology has further complicated these legal battles. While it has inspired many activists, it also faces criticism for being abstract. Nonetheless, its influence is evident in increasing legal cases where environmental justice is framed as a fundamental human right. In conclusion, the use of legal challenges by powerful entities to undermine environmental regulations represents a growing threat to ecological health and public welfare. These strategies are not just about delaying rules, they aim to reshape society's relationship with nature. As more people become aware of these tactics, there is an urgent need for stronger legal protections and greater transparency in decision-making processes that affect the environment. In recent years, there have been several high-profile attempts to roll back environmental regulations. These actions were often backed by powerful industry groups and legal teams that argued for deregulation in favor of economic growth. They claimed that strict environmental rules hurt businesses, especially those in energy and manufacturing, and that reducing regulations would help create jobs and boost the economy. Similar tactics are now being used by a new player, an AI company with close ties to both Donald Trump and Elon Musk. This company has been involved in legal challenges aimed at undermining existing environmental protections, suggesting a pattern of political and corporate influence over environmental policy. Just like past administrations, they're using the courts as a tool to weaken regulations that might limit their operations or increase costs. They target the very foundation of environmental enforcement, the rules that govern pollution, land use, and resource management. By challenging these laws in court, groups like the AI company aim to create uncertainty, delay implementation, and ultimately reduce the effectiveness of environmental protections, and they're not alone. Industry lobbyists have long used legal challenges as a way to stall or weaken regulations that could affect their profits. The scale of these efforts is staggering. From the Clean Power Plan to the Endangered Species Act, major environmental laws have faced repeated legal attacks. Some of these challenges have succeeded in limiting enforcement or rolling back protections altogether. Others have failed, but they've still created a chilling effect on agencies and regulators who may hesitate to take strong action for fear of being sued. Now, with new players entering the scene, like the AI company linked to Trump and Musk, the question becomes, can environmental laws survive these targeted legal attacks? And more importantly, what role do corporate interests really play in shaping policy? corporate interests have long shaped U.S. environmental policy through lobbying and campaign contributions. Fossil fuel, mining, and manufacturing industries often resist regulations that threaten their operations or increase costs, using legal challenges, donations, and power to weaken enforcement. Now, with a major A company linked to figures like Donald Trump and Elon Musk involved, this influence extends into technology, media power, and political connections. This partnership suggests an effort not just to shape policy but to reshape regulatory frameworks in favor of corporate interests over public environmental health. As these entities control the narrative around A and innovation, they position themselves as key players in determining how regulations are applied or ignored. For example, fossil fuel companies have spent millions lobbying against climate legislation, funding think tanks that downplay carbon emissions impact. Mining corporations face conflicts over land use, especially in regions where indigenous communities rely on natural resources. These issues often escalate into legal battles or violent confrontations, as seen with the Standing Rock protests against the Dakota Access Pipeline. The involvement of a major I company adds another layer, suggesting economic influence and control over information. In many cases, local communities fight against projects threatening their access to clean water, air, and traditional lands. These conflicts highlight environmental justice issues where marginalized groups are disproportionately affected. Local activists often lead resistance with protests, legal action, and awareness campaigns but face criminalization, threats, and even violence. The rise of deep ecology complicates the landscape. Advocates believe policies should prioritize planetary health over economic interests. While inspiring activists, this philosophy challenges the status quo by calling for radical changes. As AI companies become more entangled in politics, their influence on environmental policy could have far-reaching consequences. With vast resources and control over digital platforms shaping public opinion, these corporations are uniquely positioned to sway regulatory decisions. Whether this leads to stronger protections or further erosion of safeguards depends on how power dynamics evolve. The challenge is ensuring corporate interests do not overshadow the need for sustainable, equitable policies that benefit all people and ecosystems. If these legal challenges succeed, they could weaken environmental protections in the U.S., leading to increased pollution and harm to ecosystems. This would mean fewer restrictions on industries contributing to air and water contamination, potentially causing long-term damage to wildlife habitats and public health. Communities relying on clean resources may face greater risks as regulations are rolled back. For example, regions dependent on fishing or agriculture could suffer from deteriorating conditions, making it harder for people to sustain their livelihoods. In places like the Great Lakes region, weakened protections might result in overfishing and habitat degradation that could collapse local economies. This shift could also impact global climate efforts, as the U.S. plays a major role in international environmental agreements. If the country reduces its commitment to emissions reduction and conservation, other nations may follow suit, slowing collective action on climate change. The ripple effects of weakened regulations could be felt worldwide, from increased carbon emissions to more frequent natural disasters. For instance, if the U.S. backs away from commitments made under the Paris Agreement, it could embolden countries like Russia or China to reduce their own environmental obligations. What does this mean for everyday Americans and their environment? As policies are reshaped by corporate and political interests, the balance between economic growth and environmental health becomes even more delicate. Will communities see a rise in pollution-related illnesses or loss of natural beauty? What happens when industries prioritize profit over planetary well-being? In cities like Los Angeles, where air quality is already a concern, reduced regulations could lead to higher levels of smog and respiratory issues among residents. Environmental conflicts often involve more than just policy changes. They can lead to real-world consequences for people living near affected areas. As these legal battles continue, the question remains, how will these decisions shape the future of our planet and the lives of those who depend on it? In regions where mining or drilling operations are expanding, local communities may face increased risks of water contamination or land degradation. These conflicts often involve environmental justice issues, as marginalized groups, such as indigenous peoples or low-income residents, are disproportionately affected by industrial activities. In addition to health and economic impacts, these changes could affect biodiversity in profound ways. For example, if protections for wetlands are weakened, it could lead to increased flooding and loss of critical habitats for species like migratory birds or endangered amphibians. Such ecological disruptions may also impact tourism, a major source of income in areas like Florida's Everglades or California's redwood forests. The broader implications go beyond immediate environmental damage. They can influence public perception and trust in governmental institutions. If people believe that environmental regulations are being eroded for corporate interests, it could lead to widespread frustration and even civil unrest. In recent years, protests against pipelines, deforestation, or fossil fuel projects have highlighted the growing divide between industry and communities fighting to protect their environment. As these legal battles unfold, it is essential to consider not only short-term consequences, but also long-term effects on future generations. Will children grow up in a world with cleaner air and safer water, or one where environmental degradation has become the norm? The decisions made today will shape the health of our planet for decades to come, and the stakes have never been higher. Environmental conflicts are not just about the clash between nature and industry, they're deeply personal, often involving local communities fighting to protect their homes, livelihoods, and way of life. These struggles frequently arise when large-scale projects like mining or deforestation threaten the survival of indigenous peoples, farmers, and coastal communities around the world. Whether it's in the Amazon rainforest or along the coasts of Southeast Asia, these conflicts highlight a global issue: environmental justice. The impact is far-reaching. When natural resources are mismanaged, ecosystems suffer, and with them, the people who depend on those environments for food, water, and shelter. In many cases, local activists, often indigenous leaders or small-scale farmers, are at the front lines, standing against powerful corporations and governments. But these conflicts are not just localized, they have international implications. As companies like the firm linked to Trump and Musk push for policies that weaken environmental enforcement, the ripple effects could be felt in both developing and developed nations. The influence of corporate interests on environmental policy is growing, and with it, the risk of rolling back protections that have been hard-won over decades. Legal challenges are being used strategically to undermine regulations, not just in the US, but globally. In some regions, communities face criminalization simply for defending their land or water rights. This raises a troubling question: can environmental laws survive these targeted legal attacks? As we look ahead, it's clear that the future of our planet depends on how we respond to these growing conflicts, and whether we choose to protect the environment or let corporate interests dictate its fate. As the legal challenges continue to unfold, it's becoming increasingly clear that environmental protections are under threat from powerful political and corporate interests. The involvement of a new company linked with figures like Donald Trump and Elon Musk highlights how technology is being used as a tool in this ongoing battle. These groups are not only aiming to weaken enforcement agencies, but also to reshape the very foundation of environmental law itself. By now, you understand that these legal moves can have real consequences for your health, safety, and environment. We've seen how past efforts have rolled back critical regulations, impacting everything from air quality to clean water access. With new players entering this arena, the stakes are higher than ever before. It's not just about policy changes, it's about the future of our planet and the generations that will inherit it. What does this mean for you? It means staying informed is more important than ever. You need to know what's happening in your community, how local policies are being shaped, and who is pushing for change. Environmental issues aren't just global, they're deeply personal. The decisions made today will affect the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the land we live on. As these conflicts continue to grow, it's crucial that you take an active role in protecting your environment. Whether through advocacy, education, or simple awareness, every voice matters. This is not just a matter of politics, it's about survival, justice, and responsibility. So what other industries might follow suit? Stay tuned for our next breakdown on the intersection of politics, technology, and environmental law. And if you care about protecting our planet, share this video with someone who might be interested in these issues too. Your voice can make a difference.